Figure it out.
Hello, this is Adam Koralik from Figured Out Productions. The following video is a video of some kind, and I hope you enjoy it.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Figure It Outcast for, wow, is it already May? May 2025. I'm your host, Adam Koralik, and I am joined by the immortal Joseph. Welcome back, Joseph.
Glad to be here again. Thanks for having me back.
No problem. Are you glad to be
pay you?
Well, yeah, but are you? I was going to say,
Yes,
are you glad to be immortal? But yeah, yes. Okay. All right. Well, I'm glad you're immortal too. Okay. And okay, so this is a Patreon-backed podcast. So what that basically means is, obviously, the channel very much dependent upon Patreon funding. So thank you, Joseph, for paying me. And anybody out there who feels like doing that, you can do so to, just keep the channel afloat, to contribute, to get shout-outs, to get early access to videos, to pick subjects, or even be on the podcast if you want to, like Joseph is. So appreciate your support. Please do that. And if not, at least at the very least, if you could do me a favor and like, comment, and subscribe, and check out all the social media stuff in the description. Appreciate that. Now, let's go ahead and get started. Our first subject, Joseph, as of course, backer. You got to pick a subject, and this one seemed pretty obvious. I don't remember if you actually picked it or if I picked it and you were like, hell yeah. I don't remember how this worked, but either way.
You picked it, but it's awesome. There was no way we were not going to talk about this. So.
Yeah, exactly. So there wasn't much of a fight. Okay. Yeah. All right. Okay, go for it. Set it up.
Okay, so spoiler alert: for people who have not been paying attention to gaming news as regards to economics recently, prices are expensive. Like the Switch 2 is expensive. That's not what we're talking about today. Microsoft has announced that they decided that they're going to be raising the prices of basically literally everything for various degrees. And that kind of rubs a lot of people the wrong way because it's a price increase in the current generation, and, well, life circumstances have kind of dictated that that's kind of, quote, needs to be what happened, end quote. So, yep, time for us to talk about that.
Yeah, let me read their exact quote here. We understand that these changes are challenging, and that they were made with careful consideration given market conditions and the rising cost of development. Looking ahead, we continue to focus on offering more ways to play more games across any screen and ensuring value for Xbox players. Which is very much like, yeah, we know this sucks, but sorry, dude. That's pretty much how that reads. Mm-hmm. There's so much to unpack with this. I guess I want to start with this. There was a lot of people screaming and saying, like, this is unheard of. This has never happened in gaming. To my fellow Americans, that is not true. It's just new to us. This happens all the time in other countries. This actually happened the first time I remember this. This is me remembering this. This happened with the PS4 in Canada, like 12 years ago. After it came out, they had to raise the price by $50 and the $50 Canadian. And the big reason for that was mostly the tanking Canadian dollar at the time. And so this is not brand new. It just sucks. Mm-hmm. And here's the thing. Obviously, Joseph and I do not like this any more than anyone out there does, but it's kind of hard to, what I've learned is, in having economics discussions, like I did my Switch 2 video where I was talking about this economics and how complicated they are. It's why Japan gets a cheaper model, blah, blah, blah. What you'll find is that most people are just not willing to hear the reasons something costs more. They just think of you as agreeing with the decision, which I'm not saying I do. I'm saying that Joseph and I are pretty neutral, and we're trying to approach this from a here's why it happened perspective, but doesn't it suck? But unfortunately, a lot of people don't hear that second part. They just think you're agreeing with the decision to make stuff more expensive, which is obviously... Joseph, do you like stuff being more expensive, or would you prefer it cheaper? Oh, really? Huh.
No, I do not let...
That's...
Like in general, with like game prices going up, it's like, yeah, it went up 60 or 70 for new ones, whatever. But like, I don't like stuff going higher. It's just that I understand that costs go up, economy go bad, costs go up, video games are toys.
Wait a minute. So you're saying you don't like it going up, but you understand it going up. I think that means you like it. No. That means you like it going up.
No. That is not what it means at all.
No, I'm pretty sure it does.
It means I'm a grown-up who understands how real world works.
Right. What I want you guys out there listening, that was basically the arguments I was having in my comment section on the Switch video. That's really the point I'm trying to make. Is that if you explain it, then you're a bad guy and you agree with, and companies are greedy, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so let's get this out of the way. Companies exist for the sole purpose of generating revenue. That's why a corporation exists. That's just how reality is. And their, quote, just greedy argument usually only applies to a 12-year-old's mentality, because a 12-year-old doesn't understand the innate nature of global economics and geopolitics and external circumstances that explain why their video game costs anything. But that doesn't matter. That's not the argument we're trying to have here. We're trying to have a legitimate, serious discussion. So if you're still listening, I'm hoping you're enough of a mature adult caliber to understand that economics is more complicated than, but stuff should just be free. Okay. So shall we go over some of the actual numbers, some of the actual price increases? Yeah. Go ahead. You got it in front of you?
Yes, I do.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, so from this list that I have, looks like the Xbox Series S 512 model is going to $379.99 from $299. The Series S 1
so
TB.
$80. Wait. Let's do the math on that. So it's an $80 increase for the Xbox Series S 512 gigabyte model.
Yep.
Okay.
The 1 TB model is going to $429.99 from $349.99.
Also $80 increase.
Which makes sense. It's the same system. It's just one has more hard drive space in it. The SSD, yes, I know. Whatever. Okay. Xbox Series S digital version is $549.99 from $449.99. So $100.
$100 increase. Yep.
Xbox Series X, $599.99 from $499.99. And
$100 increase.
Yep, and Xbox Series X 2 TB Galaxy Special Edition, which I'm surprised is still a thing that they're making, is going to $729.99 from $599.99.
$130 increase.
Mm-hmm. For the 2 TB version.
Yep. With no disk drive, I believe. I don't remember if that one has a disk drive or not.
It doesn't specify digital on here, so it might, but who knows.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, go on.
Okay, and then there's a bunch of controllers listed, but it's only the Xbox Wireless Controller Limited Edition that actually has the previous price on it for whatever reason. And that one's $89.99 from $79.99.
$10 increase.
Yep, the Elite Wireless Controller Series 2 Core, $149.99 from $139.99, another $10 increase. And the Elite Wireless Controller Series 2 Full is $199.99 from $179.99. So that's a $20 increase, and I could have sworn that one was already $200 when I bought it, but whatever. And then the wireless headset is going up another $10 from $109.99 to $119.99. So,
yeah. So, all right. How do we want to approach this at this point? Like, okay, obviously there is the angle of this sucks, and we can start to go down the rabbit hole of explaining kind of why this is occurring. But to be fair to those who truly don't see this as anything other than they being greedy, the one semi-legitimate argument on that end of things is the fact that this console is almost 5 years old. Yeah. And has never had an official price drop. So at this point in its lifespan, it should have already.
Yeah,
the idea that you're doing an increase. Yeah, the idea that you're doing an increase is baffling. But not really when you understand economics. So which direction do you want to go with on that?
Well, for one thing, I mean, the fact that this is I mean, if this was PlayStation doing it, I would be more understanding. because Sony's not losing the quote console war, end quote. But like as far as Microsoft is concerned, it's like, yeah, you're raising the price of your hardware that you barely care if anyone buys. It's like, why bother? No one, like, all your exclusives come to PC. Like, the only people who are buying Xboxes are Xbox diehards who bought Xboxes already. Or
maybe you
like
just
me.
answered. Wait. You maybe just answered, dude. You might have just answered your own question.
Maybe.
They might be increasing it specifically to make people be like, oh, I don't want to buy the hardware. I'll just subscribe to like Game Pass on some other service. Think about it.
Possibly.
That might be the strategy here, because then Microsoft can be like, look, man, we made consoles and just nobody bought them. It's like, well, yeah, nobody bought them because you kept increasing the prices. But
Yeah.
it's kind of a legitimate case. Now, this is assuming there's no other economics factor to this, which very likely there is. But
no, for sure. There's
yeah.
It probably just got to the point with all the economic stuff that it's just like, okay, I mean, if we're gonna be selling these at all, they need to be priced like this for us to make any money off of it whatsoever, or even just break even for all we know.
Yeah, precisely. And with the little conspiracy theory we just threw out there, it wouldn't surprise me if on top of it they were like, well, and that's kind of like, icing on the cake. Because we must stress again, Microsoft has a huge interest in gaming, obviously, but it's been very clear to us for a very long time they don't want to make hardware. They want to make just a software ecosystem inside of other hardware. Yeah. And they have no choice but to make hardware to kind of stay brand relevant as of now.
Yeah, like, again, we've said this before, but the Xbox as a brand only exists the way it does because no one else would have made the Xbox for Microsoft. Microsoft never wanted to get in the actual hardware part of it to begin with. It's just they thought they had to, and none of the computer partners they had were going to build it because there was no money in just building the hardware. Like, because...
Exactly, yeah.
Like, and when I say that, there's no money in building the console itself if you're not also getting the licensing fees from the games. Let's be very clear there.
Yes.
That's why the 3DO never worked.
Yeah, most of the game, I mean... Peter Moore, who worked at Xbox at one point, he also worked at Sega at one point. He was the one who was also recently talking about, he's like, oh, Microsoft would love to get out of hardware. Like, they've wanted to forever. So as much as I dislike certain things he's done in his career, I will trust him as a legitimate source on this concept. He also very much made clear, like, how, hardware gaming works. Like, you don't make money on the hardware when you run a console manufacturer.
Unless you're Nintendo.
The whole, that's a different story.
Yeah.
But maybe we'll talk a bit about it. But basically the general rule always was, if your console is successful, you get it into homes, and then the real money comes in when third-party developers have to make games for your system. And then you get a fee of, a cut of every single game sold. That's where the money is. And Sega failed because they just couldn't get enough units in homes and enough big third-party developers to be on board with that. Microsoft's strategy is a little different, but they don't want to do the hardware for fundamentally the same reason.
Yeah.
So, I guess with that part out of the way, let's talk a little bit about the economics. So, all right, it's not really any great secret right now that like everything in the world is getting more expensive, and there's a whole lot of external geopolitical reasons for that. We're gonna have to see play out. Obviously, things like the concept of tariffs, at least within the U.S., etc. But generally speaking, poor economics created by a restructuring world, an uncertain world, and uncertain economies around the planet creates instability. Said instability creates basically a devaluing of the dollar and a devaluing of other currencies. And the only way to easily offset it is to effectively increase prices. This is fundamentally what we call inflation. This is why you have that stereotype of your grandparents used to pay a nickel for a chocolate bar. Like Coca-Cola, when it was first introduced in the market, was 5 cents a bottle. And it's stayed that way for decades because that's the nature of the economy. And when they raised the price to 6 cents, people were up in arms, mostly because they couldn't always find a nickel and a penny to go with it. It wasn't even the price that bothered them. So eventually they had to raise it to 10 cents. And then it became just kind of a standard thing to raise. Anyway, economics, it's very complicated and requires a massive history lesson. And there's only so much of it we can really go into here, especially in conjunction with a lot of it being very geopolitical related and domestic political related, and none of us want to talk about any of that.
No.
But the important thing to understand is that a lot of international relationships in the world and the basic structure by which the world has operated since the Second World War is starting to change, and that is coming to a head with economics in the time we live in, and that is creating additional problems. That's all I can really say without violating certain political rules. So all that really means is things are getting more expensive in pretty much all walks of life. It's a predictable economic cycle, and we just happen to be the generation living through it right now. So from Microsoft's perspective, I guarantee you they were losing money on this hardware hand over fist. They always have, as you mentioned. But now it probably reached a point where they're like, truly, we can't even build these things without it being like a massive, massive loss. And this is probably just meant to offset that to some extent. So taking that most neutral of positions, all I can really say is I get it. I understand why they did this. That doesn't mean I like it. I need that to be very clear.
I don't like it either.
But how about you elaborate a little bit on whatever's going through your mind here?
I don't like it that my favorite hobby keeps increasing the prices to the point where they're starting to price people out of being able to actually get into it. It sucks. Like the prices getting higher means less and less people are able to play new stuff. Like it just sucks. It's bad for any hobby. And gaming has not really been going super well in certain respects for the last 2 decades, frankly. So
yeah, this has the potential to create a very weird crash within the industry. And when I say that, people envision the 1983 video game crash. I'm not talking about that.
No,
but it's
never going to get that bad again.
It's not like that. But that's the only context people typically know. But what I'm trying to say here is, I will throw a bone out here and say it's obvious. Okay, everything gets more expensive. That wouldn't matter as much if people's earnings matched that. People's earnings don't. This matches with inflation. This matches with economics and predictable trends. The one thing that didn't keep up was buying power because not enough people made enough money. Minimum wage in the United States is inconsistent, but it still hovers around certain places where it's still $8, isn't it? I don't know which states do this. It's
$7.15 or something. That's the federal minimum.
Okay, that's the federal minimum.
Yeah.
I don't, because it depends on the state in a lot of cases. But you're right, there is a federal minimum. My point is that buying power has not adjusted with this, as I'm sure a lot of you know. And that's where this gets complicated because, even when I hang out in my Discord or whatever, I see particularly Gen Z who are just dude, this is impossible. I cannot compete in the world we live in. You know what I mean? I can't afford to do much of anything. And my hobby even, which keep in mind, a hobby is supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be something you do on the side of the rest of your life. It's supposed to be the part that isn't stressful. But when even your hobby rejects you for financial reality reasons, it gets kind of depressing. So a lot of them are just openly talking about, oh, well, I'll just pirate everything. I'm done trying to do this. And yeah, when individuals do that, that's fine. But if you have enough people doing that, that's death by 1,000 cuts for an entire industry.
Yeah.
You know what I'm trying to say? If you create, let me put it this way. We go back, we were talking about Coca-Cola for a second. Coca-Cola. Now, Coca-Cola, certainly there are cans of Coca-Cola and bottles of Coca-Cola that fall off a truck and that are never paid for, and nobody ever notices because it's not like individual bottles or cans have tracking numbers. That's not going to kill Coca-Cola as a corporation. But if Coke kept making Coke and just everyone just kept stealing it, nobody ever paid for it, it would eventually hit their bottom line pretty bad. And theoretically, they'd have to stop producing it. Now, I know it's an extreme example right there, but my point is, like, how many people not supporting this hobby would it take before the hobby itself has a serious realignment? Because right now, the hobby is just going, well, we can't do anything to make the ecosystem cheaper. We can't do anything to make the games cheaper. We can't do anything to make the tech cheaper. We have to just increase prices to keep the pre-existing model. Do you see what I'm trying to say? Like, it's they're not trying to find a way to make the product cheaper with the times. They're trying to find a way to make the times more acceptable of what their current pricing needs are, which is that's a short-sighted bit of thinking.
Yeah. So, the type of thinking corporations do. But
precisely. By the way, we didn't mention this. It looks like some of the Xbox games are going to increase to $80, by the way.
Yeah, that also rubs me the wrong way. Not necessarily because, again, I don't understand why it's doing it. Because, realistically, Xbox games are Switch games are, some of them are $80. Realistically, Xbox games cost just as much, if not more, to make for Switch 2.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But at the same time, this is mid-console generation, Microsoft. Couldn't you have... Well, I say couldn't you have waited until the next generation to do that on, the actual games itself? Except we don't know what their next generation's going to even look like. It's probably going to be... a nominal... at this rate, it's going to be a nominal box that, streams Game Pass or whatever. But
probably I would imagine it as a measure of local hardware, kind of like the Xbox Series S, just a no disk drive version.
Yeah, probably.
Would be my guess.
Realistically, probably, because the streaming future is still nowhere near ready.
Yeah,
for the amount of stuff that game needs to do. Gaming
precisely.
Needs to do.
So I think we're looking at an all digital platform next from them, and here's the weirdest part about this. So this is all kind of on the heels of the Switch 2 pricing guide and everything we came out of that. What's really weird here is Sony's been oddly silent. Unless I missed it. They haven't talked about price increases, and everybody was mad at them about the PS4 or PS5 Pro a while ago. But now it's whatever. I don't know. I didn't exactly expect this from Microsoft, at least... No, I guess I'm not surprised, but I didn't expect it. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, Microsoft's not the one we expected to be we need to raise prices. Is they're a distant third as far as hardware sales go, and they flat out admitted that when they lost the Xbox One generation, as far as consoles were concerned, that was basically it. At this point, there's no way to recover from it. That's why they pivoted to Game Pass and tried to make that work. But with Sony, Sony's selling consoles still. You would expect them, of everyone, to be we need to raise the prices. Unless if they're just we already released the PS5 Pro at $750. We can't realistically raise the price higher. But
yeah, I mean, I don't know how well that thing is done. By the way,
neither do I.
I haven't really heard much about it since it came out, other than the irony that it was kind of built around GTA 6, and GTA 6 just got delayed again another 6 months.
Yeah.
So that's got to be hurting them a bit. But yeah, so I mean, the thing with this, again, I guess we should stress this. It's the fact that this is 5 years in. If this was when I was a kid, 5 years, man, we'd be okay, well, the new Xbox is going to come out this year. Generations were only 5 years back in the day.
Now what we were used to.
Now they're close.
This would have just been the price is higher than the last one. Well, it's a new generation, whatever. It sucks, but it's new hardware. I mean, it makes sense. People were a bit annoyed at the Switch 2 pricing. I don't think it's necessarily because the price is more than the Switch. It's that it's Nintendo doing it, and they're viewed as like technologically like inferior compared to the other two, and then the prices were, and they jumped like from what looks like a standard MSRP of 60 to 80, which it turns out that no, the standard is 70. Some games are just 80, but with them, but it's like the amount of like the price increase is what shocked people for the Switch 2. But it was a price increase was expected because it was a new gen.
Yeah, but yes. Now, are we wanting to go down that rabbit hole right now, or are we sticking with Microsoft?
Let's stick with Microsoft for the most part. There is a part of like with the whole Nintendo thing that's relevant that I will want to talk about in a little bit, but we'll stick with Microsoft for now.
Okay, proceed. What else you got?
Okay, so like Microsoft is doing this like effectively what we're considering now to be mid-generation, which still is ridiculous, but it's like and they're upping it like by a pretty sizable amount, which is like it's
$100 US increase on a system that's been out for 5 years. Yeah, and I mean, okay, look, I have to say something because it is relevant here, and I don't know how this will change. Today, the day we are recording, is May 12th. It is also the exact same day, and please forgive me, everybody out there, it just has to be acknowledged, that the U.S. cut a trade deal with China. So, where a lot of this stuff is manufactured is the tariffs thing, not too likely to be a factor. And I'm wondering if this update will change anything, or if it really is just a sign of the times of just inflation is everywhere.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, the fact that happened, like, today means that, for all we know, Microsoft could be like, oh, well, the tariffs are gone, so whatever, we'll go back to the previous prices. Sorry. I might just use that oh, we don't have to actually do this anymore, so we won't. Realistically, that's probably not going to happen. Like, at best, maybe some of the prices might go down from and not be as steep of an increase as there was, but...
To be fair, that also just assumes that $100 is from tariffs alone, which is not the case. It mostly boils down to manufacturing. Even before today's deal, and again, when all of you are listening to this, it won't be the day of anymore. And to be fair, the U.S. and Chinese relations are always volatile, so this could all be wrong tomorrow. Mm-hmm. But the point I'm trying to make is, even before this deal and after it, China is not really the world's manufacturer anymore. We've known that in our brains because it's been that role for the past 30 plus years, since the end of the Cold War, really. Japan used to be the world's factory. They made everything, and then they outpriced themselves. They got too expensive, and China came in a post-Soviet era and was like, hey, we're willing to do a bunch of slave labor effectively and build everything for cheap. And so the world said, okay, we'll build everything there. But as of now, in 2025, things have changed a lot. And the world's factories have become 3 very different countries. You have Mexico, India, and Vietnam are now the world's factories. In fact, the Switch 2 largely is being made in Vietnam specifically to bypass, or was the idea, was to bypass American tariffs
on China,
on potential China. Right. But the thing with China is mostly associated with manufacturing because an entire generation has only known them as the world's factory.
Right.
And the only advantage they still have is that they physically have the factories already built. Where the other 3 countries I mentioned are still in the construction process. The U.S. wants to move a lot of stuff to domestic production, which needs to be built out. So China has very limited time to do anything with this. However, in the short term, we've seen all the economic effects of this, and part of that is what we're dealing with here. But there are other factors to this. Like, this type of hardware requires global stability. It requires global supply chains. Like, certain components inside your Xbox come from rare earth minerals from Russia, places you can't get stuff anymore.
Right.
A lot of it depends on chip design and chip manufacturing from Taiwan, a place we have good relations with, but that the Chinese preferred we didn't interact with. You know, do you know what I'm trying to say? Like,
Yes.
it's these external factors that cause different problems. So the news as of today with a deal being struck is nice and all, but likely probably doesn't impact this too much outside of tariff concerns. And I don't even know if that was part of Microsoft's price reasoning there.
That would
it might have
depend
been.
on how much of the Xbox is made in China, which,
Precisely.
as you pointed out,
To be
it could be none of it at this point, for all we know.
Yeah. Yeah, I legitimately don't know. That's the kind of stuff Microsoft would keep close to the chest. But the point is, we live in a complicated world, and it's a very shifting world at the moment. So it's not really shocking that a lot of these prices are changing on everything. So all I can really say is it does suck. We all agree with you. I don't think there's anybody out here who's like, yeah, price increase, woo! Nobody's excited about it. But
Microsoft's
it's important.
shareholders might be, but besides that.
Well, that's that's different. But unless any of you are in the 0.1% that gets to make money off of this type of thing, most of you are not going to be happy about price increases on anything, and that's completely fair. But the point isn't to defend price increases. We obviously don't. It is to try our best to understand them, but understand them in the limited sense that we have what information we have access to. It goes, all I'm trying to make this point of is this goes beyond Microsoft woke up one day and said, you know what? We should make more money off the Xbox. Let's just increase the prices right now because everybody can afford to buy the Xbox for more money. They didn't do that. That is not how it worked.
Nope.
That part is all I really want to say.
Yeah. One other thing that we haven't really talked about that might also, at the very least, would impact why there's no price decrease is that, you know how, like, the whole concept of Moore's Law, where like, as time goes on, computer parts get smaller and it gets easier to make them? That hasn't really been true for, like, a while. So, like, the cost savings we'd usually be expecting by now with, like, a slight redesign, it's entirely possible we're at the point where it's just impossible to do that, realistically, for the most part.
That is... There's definite truth to that, but part of that actually has to do with what I was just talking about with semiconductors and chips, and most of that coming out. Well, so a lot of the chip production comes from rare earth materials, a large deposit of which, like neon, for example, only comes out of Russia. Because in the dying days of the Soviet Union, Gorbachev believed that neon was going to be super important. So he had spent crazy amount of infrastructure and resource money to build neon facilities. And then the Soviet Union collapsed and everybody's like, hey, we need neon. And Russia was suddenly cooperative. So rather than anybody build any of their own, they just bought it from Russia for cheap. Now, in the Ukraine war era, you have to make it yourself, which is almost impossible because nobody built out the infrastructure. Right. That is just one element of what I'm talking about. And then that has to go into a semiconductor, which has to go into designs. And there's 3 different types of semiconductors. They're like the super small stuff that only the United States is really capable of building and engineering. And then there's the mid-level stuff, and then there's the low-tier stuff. Mid-level stuff, like the high-tier stuff's what like the U.S. military puts into a bomb to guide it. Then there's the mid-tier stuff, which is like what goes into your phone. And then there's the low-tier stuff, which is like what's in your coffee maker. You know, the Chinese can make the coffee maker stuff. The mid-tier stuff can mostly come out of Taiwan. And the high-tier stuff you don't have access to anyway. So the problem is less resource and higher demand. Therefore, exactly what he's saying. The stuff that's going in your phone is also going in your Xbox, and now you no longer have, you have one place that can make it and one less place that can supply resources for it. You understand the problem now? And so because of that, it's really hard to get these components. And if it's really hard to get something, that increases demand. And if it increases demand and lowers the supply, everybody's price goes up. It's age-old supply and demand economics, but it's juxtaposed with a bunch of external war-like issues. I mean, hell, India is going to be a new interesting situation because they're one of the world's new manufacturers, and now they're kind of at war with Pakistan. And it's like, okay, How's that going to affect things? You know what I mean? And then Mexico was very well integrated into the U.S. system until very recently for reasons. Let's just leave it at that. And what? Vietnam is going to build everything for everybody in the world? I don't think so. So,
Not likely.
yeah. Unfortunately, like I was trying to say at the beginning of this, we live in a complicated world that is currently very much shifting around. And these price increases are just one of the many consequences of it. And if you're into video games, sorry. You know, like, you obviously are. That's why you're listening to this. But this is just the new reality for a while until things can kind of shape out in a different way, which could take years. We just genuinely don't know. Now, what I will say is retro gaming is immune to all this. You know, we already have all that stuff. It's already out there. Retro gaming has its own different problems. You know, it's obviously you have to be familiar with older tech. You have to be in the know of what's good and what to get, where to get it, how to upkeep it, etc.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the retro gaming market was already considered expensive as hell. And now that it's going to have more people looking at it, it's not going to get cheaper. I mean, it's good for guys like me who have a big collection already. But, like,
yeah, like,
you know what I'm trying to say? Like,
has basically said, like, yeah, I'm going to pivot to playing retro stuff for a while at this point. I can't afford new shit. So.
Yeah, that's the funny thing about that is I've seen people like in my Discord talking about that too, and then they all come to the same conclusion. They're like, yeah, but retro game is super expensive as well, which is where it's going into people being like, all right, I'm going to do retro gaming, but I'm just going to pirate everything. And that is fine. I mean, I'm not, it's not necessarily legal, but like, an EverDrive is a one-time purchase.
Who's realistically, like, other than like if they're releasing a game or like Nintendo with Nintendo Switch Online, not really making money off the old stuff. So like, whatever.
Nintendo's insane about that, but that's a different story. What is interesting though, I like to think in terms of demographics and history in real time and how things can play out. It might be really fascinating to see an entire generation have nostalgia for stuff that came out like 30 years before them because that's what they grew up playing for economic reasons.
God, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, do you think about that for a second? They're like, so my sister, she has a kid. Now, her kid is not too likely to play many video games. Kid's like 2 at this point. But if my sister never gets her a video game console and still wants to introduce her to video games for some reason, it will objectively be cheaper to introduce her to even some like At Games clone Genesis or something and just let her play with that and just be like, and then she'll have, nostalgia for Aladdin on the Genesis despite it coming out 30 plus years before she was born. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
And I wonder, like, that's obviously an individual example, not trend of an entire generation. But my point is, we don't know where this is going to go. And it will be kind of weird if there is, I mean, there already are Gen Zers. And I have a bunch of them, again, in my Discord server, who have nostalgia for stuff that is much older than them for exactly that reason. And it's going to be interesting to see if that becomes an even bigger problem. Because the other factor to it is you're a millennial, right?
Yes. Yeah, I'm like
millennials
a year or 2 younger than you, I think.
Yeah, I think so. So millennials are often referred to as the nostalgia generation because we constantly revisit our childhood. We keep bringing back franchises from when we were younger, etc. But history doesn't talk about why that is much. And I think it's because we were the first generation to actually have the technology to do it. We were the last generation to grow up without the internet and the first one to start growing up with it. You know what I mean? So as a result, we were able to go look up our entire childhood and then create a massive amount of demand for it because we were the ones all already on Facebook and Twitter and everything and Instagram just being like, we want the stuff we grew up with. Whereas our parents didn't do that. Gen X didn't even do that. But Gen Z inherited already living in the internet era. And so they could only go back and look at the content that already existed, which was largely created by millennials already. You know what I'm trying to, like, it's interesting to see how that plays out. And if it's just a one and done or it's a coincidence or if it's an actual trend. I mean, there's a rule in patterns. Once is an event, twice is a coincidence, 3 times is a pattern. So if Gen Alpha gets super nostalgic for the same thing millennials liked, then there's a reason. Yeah. And this economic situation could actually fuel that possibility. for completely separate reasons.
Yeah, I mean, it will be interesting if that's how it plays out, and probably good for like game preservation and like the retro gaming scene in general. If like it gets an extended lease of life for like into a couple other generations, because like realistically, you and I were expecting like, okay, after this is done, like yeah, the next one it's going to be like GameCube era and stuff, and then PS3 era, but eventually it's going to hit the point where you're not going to be able to play the games as you remember them because patches are not going to be a thing anymore, and then the whole retro gaming thing would die. If they're getting to the point where, if things are getting to the point where like current generations of growing gamers are playing NES, Sega Genesis, and like N64 because their parents have to go to a retro GameStop and shop and buy stuff because they can't afford the new shit, then that extends things for a while.
Yep, exactly. So I think we've covered this pretty sufficiently, unless you have anything else to say.
Nothing else on the Microsoft run. I will pivot to the Switch 2 briefly for a moment.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
So there was a recent leak from Arc System Works that kind of put a light on the whole game key card thing. It turns out that, unless if that's just completely wrong and there's other like things available, it turns out that as far as like the Switch game card is concerned, there are two sizes: game key card and 64 gigabytes. So it's not so for economic reasons that we're bringing up the increase in price for the Xbox that we just brought up. It's not really that nuts that so many companies are going game key card on Switch 2, because if their game is too big for the 64 gigabyte card or massively too small for the 64 gigabyte card, that doesn't make sense to pay for the card. Yeah, of course they're going to go basically digital only, but they don't. But like major companies don't want to necessarily be like, yeah, we're digital only, and then anger retailers. So they'll have something in retail for the box that's the game key card thing. But it's like it kind of makes more sense now why so many companies are doing that. Also means that outside of like Nintendo games and like maybe like the three of them third-party games are actually using the card, the actual real card, the 64 gigabyte card, it's like not really necessarily much incentive for me to actually go physical on Switch 2, assuming I get one.
Yeah, I mean, that is absolutely true. The key cards don't require the special chips fundamentally. Thus, their supply chain is smaller. Theoretically, they can be cheaper. You fast forward that, though, and that's content that will simply cease to exist maybe in 10 years because Nintendo is the most guilty of shutting down their online services, but that's a different story.
Yeah.
But let's put the pin in that for now. Maybe we'll save that after more information. The system launches in a few weeks. Yeah, so we'll have more information. I
actually probably have pre-order secured, but like secured as in quotes, like who knows what's going to happen. Like a friend of mine managed to get two, so he managed to buy one for me, but we'll see what happens there. Like if one of his falls out, then...
I did manage to pre-order one, actually.
Cool.
Yeah, I'll talk more about it like later.
Yeah.
But let's go to the next subject here. This has been fun. So thank you, Joseph. The next subject comes from Sinjit. This is going to be kind of a short one. He usually doesn't have much of a subject for us, and this time he kind of didn't really either, but he was traveling to Hong Kong, and he basically asked me if I had any opinions on game stores. I've never been to Hong Kong, but it kind of made me want to talk a little bit about Hong Kong and just be like, all right, this is kind of an interesting dynamic when it comes to video games. So, little history lesson on Hong Kong. It was a British territory until 1997, and then it was turned over to the Chinese, technically. But part of that condition of that turnover was that the Chinese mainland, CCP, had to agree to basically leave Hong Kong alone for 50 years, and in 2047, they can fully claim it back into mainland China. So we live in that 50-year period where they're part of China, but they get to act completely separate. Now, the only reason I bring any of that up is that Hong Kong is kind of a weird anomaly as a result. It's basically part of China that speaks English, uses, a different currency. It effectively is democratic, although that's been kind of whittled down lately, but whatever, that doesn't matter for our purposes. Point is, there's been a lot of weird video games that have come out there with a lot of different versions of games that only exist in English in that region. So one of my favorite examples that comes to mind was, you remember the Dead or Alive Extreme Beach Volleyball games on the original Xbox by chance?
Yes.
Okay, so there was the first one on the Xbox, and there was a second one on the 360. There was a third one released on the PS4 and I believe the Vita.
Yeah.
But it was... Yeah, it was never released here. It was only released in parts of Asia, most notably Japan. In Japan, it's a common game. But the Japanese version is only in Japanese, whereas in Hong Kong, it actually got English subtitles. And that's just one example. There's actually a lot of games, particularly oddly recently meaning within the last decade or so, on the PS4 that had physical editions in Hong Kong of Japanese exclusive games, but with English. And that makes it kind of an interesting place to hypothetically do some game hunting in. They also had a very different retro gaming PC scene, different Famiclones. So I've never been there, so I can't speak to it with firsthand knowledge, but it's very much on my list of places I would love to go for that purpose. And if anybody has been there or is from there, please leave us some suggestions on places to go and specific treasures to look for. Because Japan I can talk to you about all day, but with Hong Kong, it's a little bit more limited.
Yeah, like I don't have first-hand experience with either. But yeah, like thinking about it, yeah, Hong Kong would be a very interesting place to go to for game hunting for the reasons you said. Because a lot of the stuff, like you said, a lot of stuff in there has English versions. So it's like it's a place you can go for importing games where you'll, assuming that, they actually work on your system, you'll be able to understand what the hell's going on.
Yeah, exactly. So I tried to do some quick Googling on this, and I couldn't find like a comprehensive list of it, and that didn't really shock me. But it's one of those things where I feel like if I just went there, I would kind of start figuring it out on my own, because I'd be like, okay, I sure don't remember that game, or I do remember this game, but look, it's written in English this time. I think I would figure it out. Now, what that gaming scene is like these days compared to what maybe it used to be like, I couldn't possibly tell you. But I will say this. Assuming, Joseph, that money was no object, time was no object, and you're just like, you're just granted, a free trip to some region of the world to go game hunting in, where would you go that isn't Japan?
Well, since you took out the obvious one...
That's why I did that, because it's obvious.
I guess Hong Kong, yeah. For the
Hong Kong, okay.
For the reasons that you
I would have thought
just mentioned, because...
All right, I would have thought you would have done Brazil, but Hong Kong is a good choice.
I mean, Brazil, I guess Brazil would possibly also be a good one, specifically because they have a bunch of Sega stuff, but...
I think that you might like Hong Kong better based on what I was reading, because it has a very distinct alternate PC history, retro PC history, which led to a lot of unique stuff, and that seems more like your type of thing. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but
yeah, I watch a couple of retro computer YouTubers, but I'm not super into retro computers. I pivoted to PC because that's my main gaming platform, mainly because it was easier to get more powerful stuff that way, and then waiting a decade for the consoles to catch up. And B, I ended up playing a shit ton of Civ and Stellaris, and those games just fundamentally work better on a PC. So
yeah, fair enough. All right, well, I guess the only other part to this I'll have to say is if anybody out there has been to Hong Kong and has any suggestions or any sort of lists for things for exclusives, please post them in the comments. I would love to see them, and if Sinjit's still there, I'm sure he'd appreciate it too. And who knows, maybe I'll get to go to Hong Kong sooner than later, and I can go look for myself. Maybe make some videos for you too. But any suggestions, I'd appreciate it. Anything else you want to say on this?
Nope, I think we're pretty good here.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Sinjeet. So we're going to move on. We have a round of shout-outs. So the following people are all Patreon backers, and they are at the tier in which they get a shout-out. So thank you very much. Jeb Malcolm, Loke, Michael Kelly, Sega Steve, and Trey Wagner. Once again, that is Jeb Malcolm, Loke, Michael Kelly, Sega Steve, and Trey Wagner. Thank you so much for the support. I appreciate you. All right, and we are back. We're going to continue on our podcast discussion here. Abdullah has returned. Welcome back, Abdullah.
Hello, happy to be back as always.
Yeah, and we got a surprise for you guys.
I'm still here.
Yeah, Joseph's back. You guys were expecting Rob first. There was like a split second where somebody thought Rob was going to join. No. So basically, here's the deal. We were obviously talking about all that Xbox stuff, and then Joseph wanted to kind of bitch about Nintendo. I'm like, well, if you stick around, that's what's going to be happening. So, Abdullah, you and I obviously have a tradition of a lot of the time talking about Nintendo stuff. And with the Switch 2, obviously, we got a lot more information. At the time of this recording, the console's set to drop in a few weeks, actually. We thought it would be kind of good to talk about all things Nintendo. However, there's kind of a lot going on. And I kind of wanted to separate this into two subjects, but I imagine it's just going to bleed all together because especially with three of us on here. So here's what we're doing. Abdullah, specifically, your subject is going to be on the concept of Switch 2 pre-orders and how that all went. And then also shout out to Spencer Perrier, who didn't get back to me, but that's fine. He's probably busy. We're going to talk about Nintendo updating their EULA to allow them to brick your system and how they are gutting your rights to sue them in the event of defects and basically how good, nice guy Nintendo is over. So this super subject is basically just going to be both yours and Spencer's. Everybody cool with that?
I'm good.
Yeah.
I figured as much.
Well.
All right. So, Abdullah, why don't you lead us off here? Did you pre-order a Switch 2? I know we talked about you maybe doing it, but I don't know. What are your thoughts here?
Okay, so first of all, I've basically said, I don't know if I said this on the podcast last time or not. I'm on the edge, but I'm not too hyped for it. Obviously, and I think we spoke about that last time.
We did, yes.
Yeah, the fact that it's not just because of what it is, it's also because of the factor of age and generations and all that. We talked about all that. But still, I'm not really that hyped for it. However, I did have in the back of my head that, you know what, maybe I will, maybe I won't. And I didn't realize it. So here's what it is. I'm gonna talk about it in the perspective from how we do it here, because it's pretty much the same as the way you guys do it. But just to tell you that the craze isn't just there; it's all over. So I signed up for so the big retailer here, like our GameStop. It's called GK. So it's pretty much our GameStop. So I signed up for them to tell me to like a notification that they're gonna get that the pre-orders are up. I do not remember receiving any of that. And maybe 2 days ago or yesterday, I'm not sure, I opened up and found out that it's all sold out.
So you just got screwed, basically.
Basically, I got screwed. Yeah, I looked at the emails. I tried to find something here and there. I didn't find anything. Could went to junk. They didn't send it. I don't know. But here's the funny part: is that I'm opening it up here in UAE, but I'm getting prices and the sold out notification, and the currency is Saudi Riyal.
Why would that be?
I have no idea why. I didn't even see that the website was .sa or something. It's just .com. So I kind of see the way the craziness of the crazy situation when it came to the pre-orders. It's kind of similar here. So when that happened, I said, you know what, my intuition was right. I'm not gonna run after this. I'm not gonna run after scalpers who ran after it and probably swept away so many pre-orders in the first place. They pre-ordered from this place and that place, and I think you know the drill. So I said, you know what? I already had comments on this console, so I'm not gonna run after pre-ordering. I'll just wait and see. Plus, I do have a friend who has a game shop. I believe I told you that before. So maybe he'll have an extra unit somewhere. I don't know. Maybe, but I don't think there'll be favoritism in this aspect because it's very, there's a lot of demand for it. The FOMO of it all is kind of where this all comes from.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. That's the experience I had in here. I mean, I don't know about others. Maybe others got the email and got their Switches. But overall, what I'm interested to see is that there is a lot of craze towards it, but at the same time, social media is kind of attacking it as well. Like there's a lot of negative stuff coming up, a lot of negative stuff people are saying about the Switch 2. But
believe me, we'll get to that.
Yeah,
we'll get to that.
Yeah, I think it's coming up. As you said, it's a whole mix of things at the same time. And both topics kind of blend in together.
Yeah.
So I guess that's pretty much the craze that I saw here, and I think it's pretty much equivalent or very similar to the craze over there in North America. Personally, I do not know if there will be places that will offer like a midnight release, and there will be some extra units available to pre-order or to get on release day. But even if, I'm pretty sure it's going to be crazy, because I remember getting the original Switch and it was very crazy then. So with this, not that sure about it. However, one thing is, I don't know if it's up on Amazon or not. I haven't checked, but I know that initially it wasn't. So I think I don't know if it's there on Amazon in the US or not.
I don't think it is.
No.
Yeah,
Nintendo
but
and Amazon
the games
have a bad relationship.
Oh,
with each
okay,
other.
so it's not there.
No, not yet. And it probably will be at some point, but as he just said, Nintendo and Amazon don't tend to like each other very much.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Amazon no longer gets pre-orders for any Nintendo anything.
Yeah, but the games are.
They leaked some street dates or something at some point, and that pissed Nintendo off.
Mm-hmm.
But the games are, because I did get. So one thing is, I wanted to. Well, I'm guessing this is a complaining session about the Switch 2, right?
Oh, we're gonna get bad, man.
Yeah. So I did, because I realized that, as you know, I'm a Sonic fan. So I realized when I knew that Sonic X Shadow Generations is gonna be on the Switch 2, I was so happy, and then I found the game on Amazon and I pre-ordered it. And then a few hours later, I realized that it's not gonna be a physical game. It is gonna be physical, but not physical.
Game key card.
The game key, yeah.
Yes, put a pin in that. We'll get back to the game keys.
Yeah, so I'm guessing things are blending in, but that's pretty much everything I got in terms of the pre-order and the experience that I've had with the Switch 2 as of the moment. Not planning on getting it when it's released. Probably gonna get it when it's regular stock. If I get the chance to get it through some means, that's fine. If I get a chance. If I don't, then you know what, I couldn't care less. There's a lot of log I have on the original Switch to finish before going to Switch 2 anyway.
Sure. Joseph, I'm going to assume you did not pre-order one.
I actually have a pre-order secured via a friend who got it via Nintendo's thing.
We did talk about this. I already forgot.
Okay.
But yeah, what happened there?
So I attempted to pre-order on the day it came out, on the day the pre-orders went live on Best Buy. Was waiting on the queue for like about an hour. The thing refreshed me into the cart with no Switch in there. Eventually it got to like 2 a.m. and I was like, I don't give enough of a damn about this. I'm just going to stop. I'm going to go to bed because my body is actually telling me to go to bed at semi-reasonable time for me. I'm going to just screw it. This is going to be a play Pokemon and Echoes of Wisdom better machine for like the first year anyway, whatever. But then my friend who managed to get a Switch during that whole Best Buy nonsense then got an email for the whole Nintendo program thing in the Discord server we're part of. He's like, hey, anyone in my area, anyone want a Switch too? And I'm like 10 minutes, so I saw that like immediately. And I was like, thinking about it for like about 5 to 10 minutes, and then when no one else responded up, I was like, yeah, you know what? I'll go ahead and buy it. Worst comes to worst, like I either get it and it works out fine. Something happens with his other pre-order and I don't get it, and he takes it instead, which is perfectly fair. Or I get it and then eventually I'm just like, I shouldn't have done this right now, and then I just sell it. Like, at that point, it's just like, whatever. But the fact that I didn't jump on it immediately, and it took me, like, multiple minutes after having that pop up, it's like, really says something about how much I'm actually looking forward to this thing. Like,
I can top that. I can top that. Okay, so here's my story. So I, too, pre-ordered it. Kind of by accident. So I had actually firmly landed on, you know what? I don't think I care. I don't think I actually want this thing all that much. It just doesn't, everything I'm reading about it with the game keys and all that, I'm just not that into it. So I had kind of been like, whatever, screw it. The only real reason I would have to get one would be to make some videos on it initially and just have the option to play it if I want to play like Mario Kart World or what few games will actually get real physical editions, right? And so that was the end of it in my thought process. Now, the day it went live with the Best Buy thing you're talking about, I just happened to be in Berlin, Germany that day, which time zone-wise, it was 7 a.m. there. And I'm an early riser, so I was already awake. It was like I woke up at 6, and I'm just like hanging around. I had already had breakfast. Like, I'm all good to go. And then people in my Discord are going nuts. They're like, oh, pre-orders are live. Oh! And I'm like, huh. All right. And I clicked on the Best Buy link. Took me there. Said to pre-order. I clicked it. It showed me that, like, waiting in your cart thing. And I was like, oh, well, this is where this ends. And then, like, 3 minutes later, it was in my cart. And it was like, do you wish to check out? And I was like, I guess. And I just kept pressing the buttons to see if it would actually go all the way through. And then it did. And I was like, what the hell? I actually did it without wanting to. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, and then I was like, huh. All right. So then I checked my credit card, and of course they had actually billed me the full price of it. And I was like, well, okay, that kind of sucks. But it was like, okay, that makes sense. I did just agree to do this. Fine. And then, like, a week later, Best Buy refunded the money, and I don't know why. I still have the pre-order. I've checked. It's still there. I don't know if it gives them the option to, like, cancel it later or something.
It was probably just a big, massive pre-authorization charge, which...
Yeah, I don't...
The fact that they removed it is not necessarily smart, because who knows what your credit card is going to be like in...
Yeah, I don't know. But either way, they refunded the money, which was nice, because I was like, oh, good, and I have extra money to do stuff while I'm still in Germany. But anyway, so I was like, oh, okay, I have this pre-order. And so I got it relatively effortlessly, and I kind of don't even want it. But it's also one of those things where it's really dumb to get rid of it.
Oh, yeah.
So I have no intention of flipping it. I want to be very clear about that. I very likely will proceed with it just so that I can make videos about it initially and, pick up, again, Mario Kart World and whatever. But that's kind of the extent of my concerns at the moment. As far as the pre-order process, it was shockingly easy for me, to the point where I just assumed everybody had an easy time with it. I was wrong. I only had the weird advantage of just organically being awake at that time of the day simply because I was in Europe at the time.
Wow.
That's it. That's all it was.
I am very surprised that you didn't have issues with the store, though, because...
Well, so here's the funny thing is, I travel a lot, right? Obviously. So I have a VPN. So I use it all the time in other countries just because, it constantly tells them I'm back in Chicago. And I think that's why Best Buy's website worked. Because it didn't come up as like Best Buy Germany, even though I don't think that's actually a chain.
Right.
But it just, I don't know what to tell you. It worked.
You were very, very lucky at that one. Honestly.
Yeah.
I was accidentally lucky. I didn't even want to be.
Yeah, like
I was kind of rooting for it to fail.
Yeah, like they didn't even...
Yeah, but it worked.
Yeah, it worked. And, like, the pre-orders didn't even go live for, like, an hour after they said they would, too.
Which is, again, I was wide awake because I had been up only for like an hour, and
you
just had
everyone in
breakfast
Discord saying, "It's time, it's up."
and I was like, oh, all right, let's click the button. And then, really, like, honestly, dude, if I had opened up the thing and it was, like, lagging and it wouldn't add to cart or it would just time out, I would have given up, like, within 10 seconds. Like, I really was not that interested. The most patient part of it that I did was when I clicked it and it said, "You're in line, hang on a second." And I was like, all right. So I got up and I used the bathroom and I came back and it was still the same screen. And I was about to give up and then it flicked over to the cart. And I was like, huh, okay. I just kept going until it worked, not expecting it to fail the entire time.
Yeah. I mean, as far as, like, problematic launches go, this has probably been, like, the smoothest one that's, been a clusterfuck. But,
yeah.
Like, I mean,
at least in my recent memory, yeah.
Yeah, like, but all, like, the PS5 and Xbox Series X and original Switch were all worse. So
I do want to point this out, though. For all the complaints we have done and all the complaints we're going to do, it is worth noting that 2 of us successfully did pre-order it and 1 of us tried to. So Nintendo is getting our money, is basically the point, even though none of us really want it. That should say something.
Yeah.
It either says something about their success or they were idiots. I'm not sure which. But either way, it says something. Yeah, maybe. All right.
Weird mix of both, actually. Yeah.
I can get behind that. All right. So, gentlemen, anything either of you want to say about the pre-orders stuff before I guess we move on to let's just rip into them?
Nah, I'm just waiting for the eventual time where stores will actually be able to do pre-orders and have everything function and be fine, which will happen probably
pre-orders or walk-ins.
Pre-orders. That'll probably happen like 500 years after we're all dead. Knowing how tech and software development works.
Okay. Abdullah, anything else?
No, just I think I said everything I had to say. It's just that I stand by the same thing, that if the chance comes, I'll get it, but not too hyped to get it. That's at least from my side. So that's it. Nothing more.
All right, then we will move on to the other part. So, Abdullah, thank you. And again, reminder, the next sequence here, Nintendo been doing some shenanigans. And Spencer Purrier, we're going to talk about this for you. So, Nintendo updated their EULA very recently, which is their end-user legal agreement. And so basically it's legally, supposedly, if this doesn't get sued into oblivion, I don't know, they're now allowed to brick your console if they detect any sense of shenanigans, which, to be fair on this one, this isn't really new. Like, I've seen Microsoft do this for years. Like, if you had a hacked up Xbox and you connected to Xbox Live, they would inevitably do something. Although usually it was just banning your account. It wasn't actually like trying to brick the hardware.
Banning the system.
Yeah, I guess that's more what they're doing now. And then the other one is you're waiving your right to sue over defects. In fact, I have the quote here. This arbitration provision precludes you and Nintendo from suing in court, having a trial by jury, or participating in class action. You and Nintendo agree that arbitration will be solely on an individual basis and not a class arbitration, class action, or any other kind of representative proceeding. You and Nintendo are each waiving the right to trial by jury. I mean,
that's standard boilerplate for literally all these corporations. The real, I mean, it's shitty, but honestly, the real thing here is what took Nintendo so long to actually jump on this.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it reads worse than it really is in practice, but it does kind of. So after the Wii U, or even during the Wii U, when Nintendo was not doing well, they did what a lot of companies do when their product isn't doing well. They become nicer.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when Nintendo opened up to third-party devs, and they were, trying to cut deals on hardware. They were just trying to make good with the fan base.
I mean, even with the Wii, they were kind of doing that, except for, the whole marketing to people who didn't usually... the whole motion controls thing, which, to be fair, we were all excited about until, the Wii actually happened.
Yeah. But my point is, that happens when the companies aren't doing well. When they succeed, inevitably they kind of revert to, I'm just gonna say it, they kind of turned into dicks.
Yeah.
And this seems like it's like the Switch may end up being history's most successful game console. It's not outside the realm of possibility that it surpasses the PlayStation 2. And the end result of it is this kind of thing. We are now allowed to brick your hardware at any time of our choosing if we detect any sort of shenanigans, or for just any reason if we really want to. And you waive the right to sue us over defects. I would argue that nice guy Nintendo is gone.
Yeah, we just have King Nintendo from NES and SNES days back. Only only worse because the entire corporate landscape is it's seemingly worse.
Monopoly Nintendo.
Yeah.
Abdullah, I want to hear what you think about this.
Yeah, so I'm not at all surprised with something like this. It's not something new, as you guys said. And I don't think it's something that's surprising that this exists or that this happened or that they can do it. Because obviously we all know Nintendo in terms of the legal matters, how they are. It's not something surprising. But as you said that the nice guy Nintendo is over, but I don't even think that they were nice from the beginning, to be honest.
No, not from the beginning, certainly.
Yeah, you could say like, yeah, pseudo nice Nintendo is over.
Yeah, well, I mean, when
fair.
we say "nice guy Nintendo," it's in quotes, and it's just the business trying to be good to appeal to people. It's not. They're still a corporation at the end of the day. They exist to.
Yeah, they have. Yeah, exactly. That's how it is. That's the purpose of it all. Otherwise, they wouldn't release anything anyway. But overall, it's not something shocking to me, and I'm not at all surprised about it. Of course, it's annoying, and kind of puts you in a position where you're going to be scared to do anything. Oh, what if this happens? Or what if I do something and then they think that I'm doing something wrong? And my God, I don't want to touch. I don't try this. Don't try that. And then you think about the price point and how much you bought it for, and you're like, should I even risk it? And if it doesn't work, then I'll have to buy another one again for this much, and so on and so forth. So it could be like a scare move to the common people who might think that modding and everything.
Can be done. Let's be clear. Yeah? Like the stuff I'm specifically mentioning was the arbitration stuff. Like the put in the that we can brick your hardware whenever we want type deal. That's shitty. I mean, I know intellectually that's there from them covering their ass for when someone mods their Switch 2 or mods their Switch and an update happens and then the system breaks without them intending to do it. But the fact that they just flat out say, yeah, we can do this whenever we want if we detect the unauthorized hardware, that's a little bit of a dick.
I agree with you.
You could just say you could just say, yeah, if you use unauthorized like software or hardware modifications on the system, and it breaks, that's on you, you idiot. And
that I agree. I agree with that point. It is still very, very. It's a crappy move. I understand, but that's just Nintendo. That's the way they are. And the evolution of what they are anyway.
Part of that probably comes from them being a Japanese company, because like honestly, from what I understand, in Japan, making like hardware modifications to your console is in fact flat out illegal. There.
Yes, that is. Yes. So it's kind of interesting when you stack these together, because you have an alteration of the EULA for bricking systems, which kind of in a way suggests you don't really own it because they have the ability to just turn it off remotely, which is bad. You waive the right to sue them over any sort of issues you have with their actions, which is even worse. And then third, and we were kind of talking about before, is the game keys thing. And you guys both have an axe to grind. Who wants to take it away there?
Yeah, so like I said in the previous one, we found out due to a leak from Arc System Works that their game key card sizes are basically game key card and 64 gigabyte cards, which is resulting in games like Puyo Puyo Tetris 2S, a game that is only 4 gigabytes in size, going the game key card route because 64 gigabytes of flash memory is a lot more expensive than no flash memory at all whatsoever, or just enough for into game key cards. And it doesn't make financial sense to waste 60 gigabytes of memory on a card because Nintendo only lets you use one size. It's like, Nintendo, well, what are you doing? You could definitely... I mean, I get that it probably simplifies the whole manufacturing pipeline or whatever, and that's probably why you're doing it. But at the same time, it's like, you could have different size cards. Your Switch cards had different sizes. Like, you're literally forcing anyone who's not making Cyberpunk 2077 to basically use a game key card. Because at this point, like, if your game is too big to fit on it, you're basically... You could use the 64 gigabyte card and make a patch, that's required to play the game, which is functionally a game key card. Or you could just use a game key card and make everyone download it. If it's too big. And if it's like so small that it doesn't matter, that's so small that you barely fill up the card, why spend the extra money for manufacturing costs to actually make the card on the actual thing when you could just do the game key card and save a ton of money? It's like,
We understand the corporate argument. Like, why they want to do it makes perfect sense. It just sucks from an end user's perspective because it effectively means the quote-unquote physical game you acquire is effectively useless without an internet download. Like, it really contains nothing. And I mean, I know I have been talking about, hey, warning to the future for the last 16 years, you don't own all these digital downloads. They can take this away from you. We have really met that point now. And I'm glad some people are finally recognizing it. But this Nintendo in particular, man, like, they shut down their servers pretty quickly, all things considered.
Nintendo's the one who, like, really did it. Like, obviously, like, Microsoft has shut down, like, the OG Xbox servers at some point.
Yeah, that was back in 2008, I think.
Even for purchases?
OG Xbox for, like, Xbox Live functionality.
Okay. Yeah.
If you mean downloading content, that was, I believe it was only this year.
Right.
Or last year.
And that was for OG Xbox. Like, you can still download your 360. Oh,
you can download the ones that you already had. You can't purchase them.
Right, yeah. That's different. Like, being able to still download stuff is mostly fine, but, like, Nintendo just flat out, like, shuts down the services. You can't... Like, I mean, they do it in stages, but, like, as it is right now, you can't download anything you bought on the Wii, 3DS, or Wii U.
That is correct. They're all completely offline. In an official capacity.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, you connect that with their official position on this matter. And it's like, you are effectively investing in a platform that they have the legal permission to brick and absolutely will once the servers are shut down and you're not allowed to play games any other legitimate way. You know what I mean? Like, that's bat shit.
Mm-hmm.
The right of ownership. I mean, who knew? We were always talking about Nintendo as being like the potential last bastion of physical media, and they've just took more of a sledgehammer to it than Microsoft or Sony ever did.
Yeah. Yeah, like, I know that we've always been saying that, like, you can't, the disc is still, like, required, like, the disc is basically like a passkey for, like, PS4 or, like, PS5 and, like, Xbox and stuff. That's not necessarily, like, accurately true for every game. For some games, for sure, like, the Doom, Dark Ages, whatever, the one that's coming out in a couple of days as of day of recording, yeah, that has, like, 85 megabytes on the disc.
Yeah,
that is a legit
at least a
key
base.
disc.
Yeah, a lot of them have at least a base build.
Yeah.
Game keys won't have a base build unless they are specific titles that choose to be physical. Mario Kart World seems to be one of them. It seems like Nintendo themselves looks like they might actually do this in a lot of cases, which is ironic. Although we'll see how long that lasts. But some of the indie devs are going to do it because they care about physical media. And then
only the ones
CD
that like,
Projekt
actually really care, though, because like,
yeah,
it's especially for them with how much money that they have available. Having to spend a ton of money on a 64 gigabyte card when your game is like not even a gigabyte is it economically, from a budgeting standpoint, makes no sense. You have to really care about physical media to do that.
I agree with you, but therein lies the problem. Like, you have created a scenario in which that's how this must work. Now, I know, Abdullah, you were not here for this, privy for this conversation, but earlier in this podcast, we were talking about Xbox prices going up, and part of that having to do with chipset issues, and no doubt Nintendo inherited those same problems. So I give them a pass on that, because that is a limitation that is not their fault. But all the same, regardless of how they got there, this is the end result. Like, we do have to deal with this now. And maybe it'll be a thing where a lot of this stuff gets resolved and we can open up these factories and blah, 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 blah. And then we just look back at some of the early Switch 2 games as like, wow, remember when games didn't have the content on there? How dumb that was? Maybe. But I kind of doubt it. I kind of doubt it'll go that way.
Yeah.
So
I think there's like 3 or 4 titles for sure that are not by Nintendo that we know for sure in the US are like actual games on the card and not game keys.
Yeah.
Like I said, Cyberpunk 2077 is one of them, which, you know what, makes sense. Like, CD Projekt Red owns Good Old Games, which, yeah, is a digital service, but they're, like, very keen on and very pro-consumer actually owning game type deal.
Correct.
Like, they don't have DRM, you can download your purchase from them, and as long as you physically still have that file and whatever system you try to install it on will actually run it, you're good.
Yeah, I agree with that philosophy, but I also don't have to run a corporation. So,
well, yeah.
But, yeah. I don't know. Abdullah, what are your thoughts on any of this?
I pretty much can't say more than what you guys said. It's the fact that it's something that you said, right? You said that it's eventually coming, and the way that Nintendo's doing it is pretty much what's expected to be happening as time goes on. And even starting from when we spoke about the fact that they can brick your console, this is just an extension of when if I recall, I think when I was the early times I was in the podcast, I remember we spoke about digital video games, how you don't really own it, and what's going on is just the evolution of that basic concept.
Yep.
The more you go on, the more you don't really own it, and it's all physical. So when it's physical, you actually do own it, but when it's digital, they have full control and they can do anything at any time. So you don't really own the game, and this is just a way of them trying to probably to find a gap between physical and digital, just to make it look better. But it's not really the case. It's actually horrible.
I mean, it's Nintendo. It's basically Nintendo going like, okay, we're only going to make the 64 gigabyte version because making multiple versions costs more money. People have the option, or we'll make this game key card thing so games could actually, be in stores and not piss off retailers. That's basically it. Like, if Nintendo didn't care about retailers, they would just be like, yeah, you either have the 64 gigabyte card or you go digital only, whatever.
Yeah, I agree with that. They don't want to lose out on the free shelf space advertising, because Nintendo is still ultimately Japanese. And so shelf space advertising is still vastly more important to them than it is to Microsoft. So, like, okay. In the past couple of weeks, I've been around a bit, okay? I went to Germany. I actually went into Poland, too, while I was there. I just got back from the U.S. Virgin Islands and the British Virgin Islands. As weird as that sounds. And I went into a few stores in all these places, right? You can find PlayStation sections. You can find Nintendo sections. But the Xbox section, assuming you even find one, it's like a couple of games. They just don't even care that they have a physical presence in a store anymore. And I think that to Nintendo in particular, that actually has a lot more value like the idea that their stuff is sitting on a store shelf. This probably was the compromise they came up with. It's just a compromise that is so damaging to the core belief of guys like us, typically, that it almost negates any real reason to even get the system. Ironically, we all did, or we're all trying to. So, you know, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out, but my guess is this is the new norm. And maybe there'll be like a subset of collectors who are like, yeah, I'll pick up all the Switch 2 games that are physical. Like, ironically, that might be a subset that's totally doable because of how few there probably will be.
Oh, God.
Yeah, but, you know, we'll see. You know, I don't know. But, I don't know. It just sucks. But, and Odala, you said something that kind of triggered a little thought in my head, which was, you know, the ability for them to, like, shut it all down digitally, etc. You know, the scariest part is even if you play by all the rules here, you're like, all right, I'm not going to hack my system. I'm not going to do anything wrong. I'm going to go out and I'm going to just buy even just the physical ones. I'm not even going to buy the game keys. Like, I'm just going to get Cyberpunk and whatever. Technically, they have the ability to shut your system off without you doing anything. I'm not saying they will, but the fact that they can do that should be, like, concerning. You know, the fact that, you know, you technically can have this thing taken away from you by someone you don't know thousands of miles away who just clicks a button. You know what I mean? And
at any point of time.
Yeah, do you own it if somebody can do that? And I would kind of argue you kind of don't. But that's the reality we live in. Like, the Switch 2 may not be interesting until after it's discontinued and everybody's hacked the crap out of it. That's, I think, the point we're going to get to. And to that end, there's one other point I want to bring up about this. So, there was a recent major Switch 1 firmware update. Did you guys see this?
Oh, yeah, the virtual game card thing.
Yeah, and how it killed game sharing.
Yeah.
No, I haven't.
Yeah, I remember.
Heard about it. No.
Joseph, if you remember it, Joseph, why don't you talk a little bit about it?
Well, I mean, I remember seeing that. I'm not, like, entirely sure, like, how game sharing, like, worked. Like, I think it was that you, like, had your account on multiple systems, and then whoever was playing on that system can play your games, provided that you're not limited to. How did that work, anyway?
To tell you the truth, I didn't use it because I never had a reason to share it, but it seems to be basically what you're describing. And I think it was mostly useful for family situations or friend situations, but they effectively killed it because of the game key thing and probably in preparation for Switch 2. And it really upset a lot of people. Like, there was a lot baked into the new firmware update. I think it's like 20.0.0 or something. That basically, like, really hurt a lot of people who were into the Switch. And it's kind of insane to take away what to a lot of people apparently was such a big fundamental feature of why they bought multiple systems in the first place, right at the end of the gate on the system's lifespan. You know, like, think about that. Like, imagine the success of the PlayStation 2 and how it was largely built around DVDs and everything. Imagine if in, like, 2010... Sony updated it and just disabled DVD playback. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I'm trying to say? Like, I'm not saying it was exactly that extreme, but there were people who bought multiple Switches because of the convenience of being able to do that. And now that won't function, even though you completely legitimately played by the rules, that should tell you something about the right of ownership.
Yeah. Like, I'm not entirely, like, sure, like, apparently, like, on the old one, you could do game sharing and it could both play the same game at the same time, which, I could kind of see why they wanted to block that, although it does suck for, like, families with kids and stuff, especially for games that were multiplayer and that you could just basically a version of, like, with playing locally with the same game on two different systems instead of on one, but... Yeah, like, I mean, I don't know. I'm surprised people were, like, actually surprised by that, considering, like, when they were talking about the update with how, the virtual game card thing works, it's like, yeah, okay, so you could basically, with someone else in your sharing group or whatever, you'd be like, hey, cool, I'll take this virtual game out of my Switch, put it on you, and then you can play my game until I decide I want it back. type deal. Which, it's like, yeah, that would make it so that you could only one person can play one copy of the game at once. Like, so I was a little bit surprised that it was like as much of a shock as it was, but not realizing that I was just thinking it worked like how like game sharing on Steam worked or on like other systems worked, where yeah, if you're like if the main account holder is playing, other people can. I didn't realize you could play the same copy the same game on 2 different Switches at once. So
fair enough. I'm just saying, if it's there as advertised as a feature and that's why you bought multiple Switches, for them to then take it away from you, I feel like that's justification for compensation, but proving that is obviously very difficult. But I don't know, I'm just, much like you guys, I'm just kind of upset by all these changes because I find them very anti-consumer, and I'm very big on consumer rights.
That is definitely anti-consumer for sure.
Yeah.
Like, that's not even in question.
Yeah. Anything else that either of you want to say about any of this?
Well, all I have to say is that, like, what if my like Switch 2 pre-order like actually still goes through and I get it, and the updates to like the last Pokemon games turn out to not really be all that great, and the game still plays like crap, I'm going to be pretty disappointed. But whatever. Like at this point, it's like, yeah, okay. Like at this point, like I mean, the one I have is going to come with Mario Kart World, so I'll be playing that a bit more than I was initially expecting when I was thinking about when I was trying to pre-order it by myself, just because I was like, I'll try to get it, but I'm not like super into it. But like, I mean, I'll have it. It'll be a game I'll actually be able to play. That's Switch 2. So, but yeah.
Abdullah?
Yeah, I see it as I see it as being part of my video game collection, which is funny because it has a lot of anti-collection because of the whole physical situation aspects, but I just see it as something that'll get the hardware for, probably keep it for a while as a part of the collection until I have a reason to actually play and use it. Maybe through, if there's something purely exclusive on there or something that I cannot do unless I have a Switch 2. I just see that this is going to be the situation with me. It will be really, really interesting to see how the console will
spec-wise, I wonder how it compares to the Steam Deck. Now I think about it.
Yeah, I think that the thing is, guys, we already know it's going to be successful. Like, the fact that pre-orders are already difficult for people, that should tell you a lot. Like, I think Abdullah and you and I talked about this a while back. Like, if you can walk into the store the day it comes out and just buy one over the counter, that's a problem. Mm-hmm. But if they're sold out already, then people are buying it. Now, maybe people won't like it. We don't know. The sad reality is the majority of users out there just don't care about the stuff that bothers us when it comes to like consumer rights and whatever. People have gotten very used to downloading content, and I think there's a large percentage of people, it hasn't really entered their brain they don't actually own this stuff. And I'm not going to say, I think there's a rude awakening coming for people, but not one that they'll actually take action on. Like the closest you're going to get to that is when some family buys one and they get the kid a ton of games, and the kid loves it and he's playing it for a few years, and then he grows up a little bit and then decides, okay, I'm gonna trade it in because I want to buy whatever, my new hobby is X, Y, and Z. And they're like, yeah, we can take the system, but there's no games on this really because you don't own any of this.
Didn't that happen to someone in the Discord?
That it wasn't my Discord, but it was the comments section. Okay. I know, just to refresh on that story. So basically, this guy on my YouTube channel commented. Basically, he forced his kid to always buy physical editions of Switch games, never digital. He just wouldn't let him do it. And his friend always got the digital, and the kid was like always kind of annoyed because he was irritated by the fact that he had to like go to a store and he had to like physically get this thing, and then he would have to like manually switch between all the carts, and where his friend, you know, just could just hop between games real quick. But the day he figured out that he had been doing the right thing was the day that the two of them, because they were friends, they went to a GameStop or whatever, and they decided to trade in their Switch collections. And the kid with all the physical games, you know, he got like the system's value plus the value of all the games, and his friend with just the digital one only got the value of the system. And that kid was like, well, wait a minute, I have all the same games, but they're on the system. They're like, yeah, well, we have to wipe the system, and they're tied to your account. These are worthless. You get no value for this. And the other kid figured out in that moment, oh man, these things have value, the right of ownership. And probably the other kid learned a valuable lesson too. But that's individuals. Like, we are also, it's not, humanity is not really catching on to this, and those that are don't have the power to stop it. While simultaneously, legally speaking, corporations are doing everything they can to prepare you for the fact you don't own this stuff. Hence all this EULA stuff and et cetera, et cetera. So like, this is the last gasp of physical media. I think we can probably all agree the next Xbox iteration will not have any sort of disk drive in it. It would be shocking if it did. And Sony, I don't know.
I mean,
I don't know what they're going to do.
The fact that Nintendo's doing what they're doing with the whole game key cards, I mean, the fact that Nintendo's willing to do that kind of makes me think that at best, like, if Sony does, well, I mean, I guess Blu-rays can hold a lot more, so, and they're cheap, so maybe
they're disc, yeah.
They're disc, so maybe they'll just keep it and just be like, yeah, whatever. If you don't want to go to and then just, they might just keep it just because why not, but realistically, like, if Nintendo is moving away from digital to the point where whenever the inevitable, well, whenever, like, Nintendo's system after the Switch 2 comes out, I don't expect them to really, at that point, still have physical either, if they're going like this. So, like, at that point, like, Sony just might be like, look, even if even Nintendo doesn't care anymore, there's no reason to keep physical on this thing.
The only reason I could see Sony doing it is if you look at, we don't have access to these numbers, right? But Sony's already tested it with the PS4 or PS5 Pro. Disc didn't come with a disc drive. You could buy it separately, etc. So as I agree with you, the disc production is cheap. The case production is all cheap. That's the whole point. It's not, there's no chips in that. So that's just plastic. That's cheap enough. So the only intrinsic value that Sony gets out of that is the advertising space within retail outlets. And the question is there enough value in that to offset the negative side of it for them financially? The actual production costs, the actual shipment costs, etc. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. Retailer
cut. Right, retailer cut, etc. And the actual manufacturing of a no doubt optional detachable disk drive. You know, it's like, which one is worth it? We don't know. Sony no doubt has done plenty of internal research on that and will come to some sort of consensus. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, even if they say, yeah, we're going to stick with physical, it's not like it's going to be good. It's going to be like the same level of broken, if not worse. And it's not like physical media is too likely to make some big resurgence here unless something truly forces that. But I don't see what would. And that's not a battle
short of the internet collapsing and not being fixable.
Right, which would be a much bigger problem than video games.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm not going to worry about it. But basically, I look at it as like, this is like one of those senior moments. Like, I'm 38. By the time the PS6 is out, I probably will be 40. I don't know how much I'm going to care. I have more physical editions of games than I can ever realistically play in my own lifetime. Whatever, I'm good. I feel bad for, and I know Joseph and I, sorry, Abdullah, you weren't here for this, but Joseph and I discussed this earlier about Gen Z and these younger kids who are probably going to have some sort of attachment to it and have just nearly an impossible time capturing that. Just due to the fact that, remember what I said before, Joseph, about how millennials, the nostalgia generation, were the first generation that could really document and preserve their own childhood? Mm-hmm. Well, Gen Alpha, ironically, cannot. Not really. They can really only do it with certain content. But like if you get into some big online game that only ever existed digitally and then gets shut down, it becomes debatably like lost media at a certain point. And I don't know, maybe society needs that, maybe it doesn't. I don't know. These are one of those things where you have to project so far into the future, you'll inevitably be wrong. But it's just kind of interesting to think about. Anyway, that's enough side tangent there. Anything either of you want to say on this? Anything else?
I'm good.
You're good?
Yeah, I think I'm good too. I already made my derogatory comment about my Switch 2 being a Pokemon machine. So,
all right. Well, even though we're all upset about the Switch 2, we are still buying it because we're stupid. Okay. So
yes.
huge shout out to Spencer there. Thank you very much. Abdullah obviously joining me as well. Joseph obviously sticking around. Appreciate it. Sinjeet earlier for having that subject for us, and additional shout outs here to Jeb Malcolm, Loke, Michael Kelly, Sega Steve, and Trey Wagner. Thank you very much. If you guys could do me a favor, you're listening to this, please like this video, comment down below, subscribe if you've never done that before, and check out all the social media stuff in the description: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Discord, especially Patreon, so that you can be here, you can get early access to this and other videos, you can get shout outs, you can get subjects, you can even be on here. You can check out that as well as things like Spreadshirt if you want to buy merch or whatever. So anyway, thank you guys very much for watching, and we'll see you all later.